Hi, and welcome to the Animal Welfare Junction. This is your host, Dr. G, and our music is written and produced by Mike Sullivan. Today's guest, I'm very happy to introduce you to Dr. Susan Krebsbach, the Executive Director of Veterinary Association for Farm Animal Welfare. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the Junction.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
I'm super excited to have you here because, as we were discussing a little bit before, I met you a long time ago and we've kind of been following each other. And this is an amazing organization that you are involved with. So, before we start talking about that, though, can you let our listeners know about your background, your education, and kind of what led you to where you are today?
Okay. It's kind of a long list, but I'll sum it down for you. I started out actually not in veterinary medicine. I have an engineering degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, worked for IBM for many years, but they were a great company to work for. It just wasn't where my heart was. And my heart was with the animals. And so at the time I was living in Ohio, like where you're at, decided to go back to vet school. So I went to The Ohio State University and because of my interest in animals. So then when I graduated, we moved back to Wisconsin, where I'm from originally, and I worked in a small animal practice for I worked in a couple different ones for about maybe 7 years or so. Had a real interest in animal behavior, so decided to go ahead and start my own behavior practice. But this whole time, I've always had an interest in animal welfare, well before I became a veterinarian, and was on board of directors that were involved in welfare issues and things like that. And so I've always followed it. And one of the things that's always been in my heart is the welfare of farm animals, because of all the animals that are, all the species of animals that are most abused and neglected are farm animals. And so that's really why I got involved with FAFA, because it's something I've always wanted to do. And when I found out that there was this group of veterinarians, actually, we have some non-veterinarians that were getting together probably about 2 years ago or so. We'd had our big launch back in January at the VMX conference, which was a lot of fun. Took a lot of preparation, I know you're aware of, running multiple different organizations. But for me, the reason and I think others have an interest in animals, and because our mission is to advocate for animals used in food and fiber production, providing a veterinary perspective really grounded in animal welfare and ethics. Okay. And so one of the big reasons what we started it are two from my perspective. One is because, like I said earlier, of all the species of animals, they're probably the most neglected. And number two is the whole concept of speciesisms. And what that means, of course, is that certain animals, because there are certain species, don't get as much consideration from a welfare standpoint than others do. So, for example, we have for many, many years, we castrate piglets without any anesthesia. We wouldn't consider doing that with dogs and cats, although years ago they used to do it with cats too. But as cats and their status was raised in our society, no, we wouldn't even consider it. So those are kind of my background and the reasoning my FAFA came to be.
So, who is your target membership? Like, who are the individuals that you invite to join?
Well, number one are veterinarians. That's what we call it, Veterinary Association for Farm Animal Welfare, or FAFA. And also veterinary students, as we were talking about before we started recording. The students are such an important part because they're the future of veterinary medicine. And to have that enthusiasm, like I said, many times I wish I could just bottle it. But we also have an affiliate membership. And this is really anybody that's interested in animal welfare, particularly farm animal welfare, because we're the only veterinary organization in the United States that's our sole focus. And so we want to have other, like, there's several people that's in our leadership team. We have an attorney, we have a financial expert, and then we have a PhD. So they're not, and so it's nice getting different perspectives. So that's what we want in our membership as well. So it's just anybody that has an interest.
Yeah, I was thinking I'm a board member with Ohio Animal Advocates, and the majority of the members in that organization are actually attorneys that are interested in animal
Right.
legislation and that
Right.
kind of stuff. So I think that this would be a great opportunity for individuals like that to,
Absolutely. Just having that interest, and we understand that we have a real diverse membership. But we also, and we're trying to target that audience. But I would say the primary would be the veterinary professionals.
so in saying farm animals or food animals, what species are we talking about?
Okay. So the ones that you think of offhand, of course, are cattle. So that include, dairy cows and beef cattle. It can also include pigs and it can and chickens or poultry. So and chickens and turkeys. But there's things like goats that are considered food or fiber. And there's even like llamas and things like that. But I say the primary ones definitely would be cattle, pigs, and poultry. But that doesn't
Yeah,
mean we forget about the other things.
yeah, because I suppose, we think about farm animals and immediately to mind comes food, but animals are used by humans for more than just food.
Right. That's why we changed originally when we are doing our mission statement, we just kept it as, for food animal or used for food. And we said, but it's really food and fiber. So sheep that are used for wool and things like that. So it's greater than just food. It also includes fiber.
Yeah, yeah. I was just thinking back to being in vet school, 25 some years ago, and we called it food animal, but we did deal with the alpacas and the llamas that were not being eaten. So yeah,
Right,
kind of like a little bit of a misnomer.
right,
So,
right.
so what kind of research is out there on farm animal wellness?
Well, it's improving. Okay, we got a long way to go. Okay, but if you look at, so we've got organizations like the American College of Animal Welfare, ARACA, and these are people that are board certified specifically on animal welfare. And that didn't exist when I was in veterinary school, so it's really growing, and it really helps people that are in ACA that want to uh, become better on understanding animal welfare from a scientific standpoint. So things are improving. We've got veterinarians and other professionals that are that are becoming more knowledgeable about the physical and psychological needs of all animals, right? But when it comes to applying that information to specific governmental policies or agricultural norms or even veterinary norms, there's kind of a disconnect. So I think what's really missing right now, Dr. Gonzalez, is the fact that we need to take the information that we've got, because the information is out there, and get it so we can start applying it. And that's one of the driving forces behind FAPA, is that we want to take what's already out there that we know, and how do we make it a veterinary norm? How do we make it a governmental policy? How do we go about doing that? And that's why it's so great to be able to have people from different walks of life and different professions involved.
So one of the things that I feel some of our listeners are going to say is, how can you say that you're okay with the slaughter of animals, right? Because there is a it's a hard thing to think about that we're looking for their welfare, but in the end they're still going to get slaughtered.
Right.
So how would you answer that?
And that's a tough question, but what I'm pretty sure of is that we will not stop eating animals in my lifetime. So what I'm trying to do, and as a veterinarian, I feel myself and others are in a primary position, just from our expertise and our ethical responsibilities, to make sure that all animals have a good life, right? And so that means that if they are used for slaughter, that they had a life worth living, and that if they are slaughtered, that it's done in a humane way. Um, and and make sure that their life until that point in time is a good life, worth living. And it really just kind of boils down to that. And so it doesn't mean that one day we won't get there, but like I said, it's pretty unlikely it's going to happen in my lifetime. And so when I decided to be involved with FAFA, I really felt, what is the most I can do as a veterinarian to help with these different species of animals who I feel are the most neglected. And I thought I can help them have a better life. Do you
I
have any
think that
thoughts on that?
No, yeah, no, exactly. And that's what I try to tell people. It's like working with something that, we may not agree with the practice, but our purpose is the welfare and the well-being of the animals, right?
Correct.
Kind of
Correct.
regardless. It's even like I don't necessarily like people breeding dogs. However, I will work with them to make sure that they're as healthy as they can be.
Good point.
So it's not about putting my principles in front of it, is making sure that I'm looking for the welfare of the
Right.
animals.
Right. And that's really what FAFA is about. It's about really providing specific, the welfare of animals that are used in food and fiber production. That's the focus. There's so many things, from a welfare standpoint that you can concentrate on, but we just felt as an organization that had to be our focus. And so from that, we've come up with 3 different campaigns. Would it be appropriate to go ahead and talk about those
Yes,
now?
please,
Okay.
please do. Yeah.
So that's the other thing too, is when we're, and this is why I just have a delightful group. There's about 11 people, 11 of us that are on the leadership team, and with lots of different perspectives. And there's so many different issues, welfare issues that could be addressed. But when you're starting out as an organization, you have to pick, well, first of all, what is something that is of concern, number one, right, for the animals? What is something that we could accomplish as where we could possibly change things? So after much discussion, we boiled it down to three campaign areas. One is on pain prevention and mitigation. So do simple things like, instead of castrating a piglet with no anesthesia, let's give them some anesthesia. There's certain simple things that we can do to make their life better. Okay. Then we've got our second one is in living environments, providing animals a way that they can express their own physical and psychological needs. So that's why we're against things like gestation crates, where you have, pregnant pigs that cannot even turn around, and they're that way for, many, many months. So let's provide them with a good environment to live in. And lastly is to really ensure humane end of life practices. So things like ventilation shutdown, where animals are essentially their oxygen is taken away, and then they're broiled or boiled, from heat. That's a very they've done studies, and I think they can sometimes suffer for over an hour. We can do a better job, and we should. We can and we should, as veterinarians, do a better job. And that's what FAFA is about. And I understand that there's a lot of debate about whether it's right or wrong, because many of these in poultry, many of them have been putting down because of the highly pathogenic avian influenza virus. Some people say, well, look, is that the way to, can we do a better job, is what it boils down to. And I think we can, and I think that we should. And so that's what the ensuring humane end of life practices is really, aimed at. And so down the road, we're hoping we grow so much that we can take on lots of different ones. But for the next couple of years, those are kind of the 3 areas that we're going to be really concentrating on.
And I think something that some people don't realize is how some farming practices affect the environment as well, right? Like I'm in an animal law class, and they were talking about how some of these big factory farms are actually creating huge problems for the environment.
Correct. Yes, and that's absolutely true. And it's worse when you have these big confinement areas, right? So it's different than if you have a whole bunch of cows in one small area, it's harder to get rid of their waste than if they've got a pasture. And so that affects the environment. So you're absolutely right. There's a lot of environmental reasons to make sure that they have a better life as well.
So I think that one of the things, some of these companies do is they try to explain why they need to use the methods that they use. Like for instance, like gestation crates, or like some of the things that they do to poultry, and they say that they're doing it actually for the benefit of the animals. How truth or not truth is that?
Well, and this is where the animal welfare scientists are coming in, right? Where because we need to go back to the data. What does the data tell us? The data is not telling us that. And that's why FAFA very much wants to take what's already been done and trying to implement it, For the most part, and this is a gross generalization, but for the most part, these practices are done for the almighty dollar. because it's cheaper. And so it keeps the cost of their product down and things along that line. And again, this is not true for every single case, but it's true in many of them. Like I think about, for example, going ahead from keeping pigs in stalls versus doing a group housing. And the thing they say, well, we don't want to do group housing because there's too much fighting going on. And that, and so there's ways that you can do group housing because is there an occasion there would there be fighting? Probably. But there's a way that we can do these things and be able to provide a better life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that, it's trying to, as you said, it's all made because of money. And then they're looking for reasons to tell people why, because public perception is a huge part of this, right? I don't remember where I saw it, but I saw some research about how people prefer to purchase meat or animal products from humane sources as
Right,
opposed to inhumane
right,
sources.
right. And this is a great, it's called the Five Freedoms Dairy in Colorado. I don't know if you've heard of them,
No,
but
I haven't.
they embrace the whole ideas of the five freedoms, which is now becoming the five domains, and so they embrace that for the animals that are in their care. And many people they might spend a little bit more, even seek it out, because they know that the milk that they're purchasing are coming from animals that have been treated humanely. So they're out there. It's just a matter of we've got to get that data spread out more, and that's where and there's more work that needs to be done from a scientific standpoint. But we're a lot further along than we were like I said, when I first graduated from vet school many years ago.
So, can you let our audience know what are different ways in which animals suffer? Because again, we are talking about their physical suffering,
Right,
but a lot of people don't think about their mental well-being.
right. Perfect example. So when you have a dairy cow that gives birth to a male calf, that male calf, in most cases, is immediately taken away from the mother and then kept in a very small area for 6 months and then sent off to be used for veal. The reason for that is because even though calves are extremely social animals, just like puppies are, the reason they do this is because they want the meat to be very tender. So they don't want the calves to have a lot of muscle, well built up, muscle. And you have to remember that the dairy cows are very attached to this calf that they've just given birth to. Some of them don't even get colostrum, which is so important from a health standpoint. They're taken away right away. So there's a lot that goes on from a psychological standpoint that we haven't even I shouldn't say we have begun to measure it. It's just that we've got a farther way to go. And it's interesting. There's a lot of I've got many friends who are smart, intelligent human beings, but when I tell them that in order for a dairy cow to produce milk, they have to get pregnant. And they're like, what? They're surprised. And then I explain to them, many of the female calves, they become dairy cows. And because many say, well, they're not killed for for their milk. I said, well, eventually are when their production goes down, but that's a whole nother issue. And I said, and then many of the male calves then become veal calves. And I've had many family members and friends that are just mortified by this and had no idea. And these are smart, intelligent people. So understanding that whole process, that there is so much beyond just the physical harm. There's a tremendous amount of psychological, and we don't, like I said, when you look at calves that are playing together, and you equate them. This is the whole speciesism I was talking about. Most everybody can relate to a bunch of puppies running around and having fun. And the same thing is true with cows and piglets. So many of the farm animals are very social animals that need to have that. And when you have really strict confinement, it's very, very difficult for them to achieve it.
Yeah, with the pigs, with the gestation crates, I have done space and neuters on pet pigs,
Mm-hmm.
and they're playful. They're kind of like dogs. They want to run around and they like to eat and they like to get
Right,
treats and all that stuff. And
right,
we think about those gestation crates, and I have seen pictures of like horrible injuries that they get because they can't move. They get
right,
ulcers. They'll
right,
even trample on the babies as they're, trying to accommodate themselves. But you're taking this animal that's so intelligent and so full of energy, and you are keeping it from being able to move at all.
right,
It's not even like you're keeping them in a small crate.
right.
You're literally keeping them from being able to turn around, right?
I know. Yes, yes. And and they say it's about the size of a refrigerator, and you've got a 200-pound animal or more plus, confined into something that's small.
One of the things that I was made to do in school that thankfully I don't have to do ever is I remember dehorning cattle. And there was this like hot thing that we just put around it and just burn them off. And they're screaming. And I can still remember the smell of it.
Right,
And, the people around me are like, no, it's just a reaction. They're not feeling it. But I'm
right,
thinking about all that heat damage and everything else. I also remember using like these big cutters to just chop them off and just leave them open. And then all
right,
the flies flying around that.
right, right. So yes. So number one, you're right. It causes pain. And secondly, just what could happen from a medical standpoint afterwards is elevated because you've got an open wound essentially, and it's not necessary. That's the other part too. This is what we're talking about, doing things. We talked the campaign is, pain prevention and mitigation. So let's not do these types of things. There's really no need for it. And what's interesting is that I was aware that there is a study out there talking about how there's some indications that there's some residual problems from dehorning, that where they I can't remember specifically what was, but they were more head shy or things like that. They were measuring those types of things. So I think that there can be psychological impacts of it as well. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah,
And
I
we'll
guess
get
kind of
more and
like
more scientific
like
data on this.
declawing a cat, right? It's not
Yeah,
just the damage and the pain that it causes, but it does
correct,
change their ability to express themselves. So
correct,
it can cause some
correct.
emotional damage to them.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So I think it all fits in. Dr. Gonzalez, we can do better, and we should do better. That's what it really all boils down to. And as veterinarians, I really think we can lead the way, but we need to have others that are involved in the whole welfare movement. I just wish that veterinarians would be one of the reasons we started FAPA is they do encourage veterinarians to be more involved in the science of it, of why we should be doing this.
So, what are things that we can do better?
As far as for the farm animals,
Yeah.
so we mentioned a couple of them already. We talked about allowing for dairy cows to be able to raise their calves. Things like providing anesthesia to piglets when they're castrated. There's things like there's often what's called debeaking for poultry. There's no need to do that. We can provide a housing environment because they worry about injury to other ones, but you provide them with more space instead of putting a whole bunch of chickens in the same small crate. Then you're gonna or cage. Then you won't have the injuries from that standpoint. So,
And
and
really quick, some of our listeners may not understand what debeaking is. Can you explain what that
okay.
process
So
entails?
typically, what's done is that they'll take an iron and they'll play it without any anesthesia, and they'll place it on the pointy part of the beak of the chicken or the turkey, and they'll burn it off. So it becomes kind of a blunt, it becomes blunted. And it's, as you can imagine, it's quite painful. And I know that there's some people say, oh, well, they can't feel pain. They sure can. And we can, easily describe that. So I think people are understanding that. I know when I was in veterinary school and I was going through my large animal rotation, which included, many of the farm animals, there was actually a caregiver that said, oh, they don't feel pain. And really believe that. And this is someone that's working at a veterinary school. So I'm hoping things like that change and have changed. But so there's many, so not only can so things like castrating piglets, that's probably going to continue to happen for good reasons. But let's provide them with anesthesia so they don't go through the pain. Let's not do procedures like debeaking, where it's painful. Let's go ahead and provide cows with their to naturally be in a pasture area, being able to have calves being able to play with one another. So there's a lot of things that we can do like that, that just it's just going to take a little bit more effort to transfer the data that we already have and create more data that we need, and transfer that too, like I was talking about before, into governmental policies, into agricultural norms, into veterinary norms. And that's what we really need to do to change the ways it's done. Are there
Yeah,
any
I think
particular ones that you're aware of that you want to make sure the audience is?
no, and I mean that's basically it. Like I always think about just the freedom to express themselves. To me, is the most important thing, right?
Agreed.
I just want them to be outside. I have been to farms where you know, the cattle is outside and they're eating. They just seem happy. You
Right,
can see them playing, you can see them
right,
laying down and
right,
everything else.
right.
And then I have been to factories where they can barely move,
Yeah,
and you can tell, you can see it
the
that
difference. See
you
the
know, they're
movement.
suffering. And I think that it's easier for us to just think, oh, they can't feel, because imagine the horrible guilt that we should
Right,
feel if
right,
we acknowledge the fact
right.
that
That
they
we
feel
do feel
pain.
pain.
And I
Exactly.
think, thinking back 20, 30 years ago, we didn't care much about pain in small animals, right?
Right.
Like we were not prescribing pain medication as frequently as what we're
Oh,
doing now. But now they're getting two, three different types of pain medications and
right.
anti-inflammatories, right?
When I was in vet school, one of my surgery professors said, well, and this was like, I think that there was a dog that had broken his leg, and they weren't prescribing any pain meds. And the reasoning was, well, we need them to be able to show their pain so we would know, so that they don't over exercise or something like
Right.
that. And we're like, oh my gosh, now we wouldn't think about that.
Right.
Of course, like you said, we give them multiple different, we know so much more about pain.
Yeah.
And so yes, no, I'm in agreement. And to
Yeah.
talk about the natural freedoms and things, or the natural expression, at this Five Freedoms Dairy that I was telling you about, there was a picture that Dr. Jim Reynolds shared with the FAFA group, and it was of this dog who would go up to one particular cow, and every morning he would check on her. And so they had a picture of the cow had her neck was stretched over the fence, and then the dog was up sniffing her nose, and it was just, so there's natural relationships that develop, if they have an opportunity to do so, you know.
Yeah. And one of the things too is like just thinking about my experience with small animal and how it can also relate is that animals are very stoic and they don't necessarily, if they break a leg,
Yeah,
they're just gonna hike that leg up and keep
right,
walking. And people
right,
think, well, yeah, he broke his leg, but he's not in pain
right,
because he's not crying.
right,
Well, it's not what they do, but
right,
it is painful.
right,
We are verbal animals.
right,
So anything that happens to us, we're gonna tell anybody that will listen. And we
right,
want that sympathy.
right,
Animals are not looking for
right.
that. They
Well, I
just
also, like I had a friend of mine whose dog was just diagnosed with mast cell tumor and a pretty high grade of it. And I said, Julie, the good thing about this is that, your dog doesn't know he's sick, and so they don't have the same psychological trauma that we do, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't treat the pain, we shouldn't treat the disease condition, absolutely, but they don't have the same psychological trauma that we do when we discover, oh, we have to have an eye removed or something like that, As a matter of fact, my mother, bless her heart, had a dog that had one eye was missing, and we don't know what from, but she still is a very happy dog, and doesn't let that get in her way.
yeah, and it slows down, like I say, healing processes.
Right,
So it's going to, there are so many benefits of treating pain and treating swelling and treating all those issues. So
absolutely.
again, it kind of comes back to if some of these people recognize that and do something about it,
Mm,
then I feel, consumers are going to see that and say,
right,
you know what, these people care, as opposed to as people learn more
right,
about the pain and the suffering that animals undergo, then it should affect the
right.
the
And
facilities.
I don't know about you, but one of the things I struggle with is that there's a lot of people who don't want to hear the reality. It's
Right.
la 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 la, and it's a tough one. And I get it. It's hard. Oftentimes people say, well, how can you even do it, Susan? I said, well, first of all, someone's got to. And secondly, I have a real desire to make a difference, for these animals who, for the most part, are neglected. Um, again, as a whole. And so considering the procedures that they have to go through and all. And so that's a tough one to reach out to. And that perhaps we have to do it in a way that they, first of all, that can be easily understood, and in a way that they can feel like they can make a difference. And they say, well, how can I make a difference? I said, well, just by what we consume makes a difference, and so that's kind of the approach that I take, because so many people feel like these things are just beyond their anything that they can do about it, and so therefore they do nothing. And I'm hoping that with time, as people learn about the care of animals and the welfare of farm animals, that more conscious decisions will be made about their choices.
So speaking of learning, you alluded earlier as far as CE opportunities. So what kind of CE opportunities does the organization offer?
Okay, so we had our first one back in May, which went very, very well. I think we had over 300 people that signed up. And it was Dr. Abby Zoltik, who is our Director of Education. She's the one that gave the presentation, did a fantastic job. It was specifically about pain and kind of just an intro to it. This coming Wednesday, we're actually having another one. And so it's going to be our second webinar, and it's called Highly Pathogenic Avian Influenza, Vaccines and Vaccination Programs for Poultry. And this is, like we talked about, the avian influenza is the cause of millions of animals or poultry's death in the last, since I think it was February of 2022 when it really took off. So so this is a way of preventing it, so let's do things that we can prevent this horrific thing that's happening. And it's going to be given by Dr. Erica Spatman, who is a research biologist, and she's with the Exotic and Emerging Avian Viral Diseases Research Unit at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, so the USDA. So we're really looking forward to it. She's given presentations before, and it's very, very well thought of. It's going to be, like I said, on this, if you go to our website, vafa.org, so vafaw.org, and go to under education, and you can sign up. It's for free. It's at 8 o'clock Eastern time, and it lasts for about an hour and a half with questions and everything. It's free. There's no charge. However, it will not be recorded for circumstances beyond FAFA's control. So I would encourage anybody that has an interest in this to sign up, and let other people know too. I know Dr. Gonzalez is going to go ahead and spread it on her social media, and we really are looking forward. I think the first day we had over like 80 people that had signed up when we first started advertising about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I think that there's going to be real interest in it.
And is the organization open to only people in the US, or is it a national or worldwide organization?
Worldwide. Matter of fact, I'm sorry, I don't remember the numbers, but Cameron Cryer Massey, she's the attorney, and she also handles a lot of these numbers and all that, but she figured out, I mean, there were like, I don't know how many different countries that were at our last webinar, and I should have had the statistics, so I apologize, I don't have those with you, but there were several people from outside of the United States.
Excellent. So what resources does the organization offer for all individuals, like all stakeholders, as far as veterinarians, farmers, community advocates, anyone that wants to do better for farm animals?
Well, one thing that we just got a grant for, or for part of it anyways, is that we are doing what we're calling the pain report. And basically what it will come up with a fancy title later on. But what we're trying to do is to assess what are the different areas of pain thresholds that we look at, okay, for farm animals, how it varies from species to species, and what are some of the things that can be done to either prevent it from happening, like maybe not do the procedure, or provide pain management for it. And so it's going to be pretty involved, but we just got partial funding for it. Dr. Gwendy Reis-Ig, who is our president, she's kind of taking charge of this. And we've got the AWI is on board with it. They're providing their support as well. So we're real excited. We're hoping to have that by next summer, have it, and where we could actually publish it. And what we'll do is we'll publish it. It'll be published on where you don't have to pay for it. What's the word I'm looking for again, Dr. Gonzalez? So it's free, a free public. So it'll be done on. It'll come back to me, but it'll be after we're off the podcast.
Right. So anybody listening that wants to become involved, whether it be by joining or perhaps they want to donate to the cause, how can they go about doing that?
The best way is just to go to our website, fafa.org. So V is in Victor, A is in Apple, F is in Frank, A is in Apple, W is in work.org. And just go go ahead and go to the donate, or you can go ahead and go membership tab, and you can sign up. Your first year of membership is free. So, and again, encourage people to take advantage of that. That's how you got to get real good use of FAFA, or an idea of what FAFA is all about. Of course, we're always open to receiving donations, anything to help with our mission. And like I said, it's a fantastic group of people that we've got on our leadership team, and we're hoping that grows with time. The hard part, and then this, Dr. Gonzalez, with any new organization, is that you'd like to deal with it all, right? Everything, every issue that someone approaches you about, you want to do something about. But unfortunately, because we don't want to get the mission creep, where we get outside of our mission. And we know that's why we chose those 3 different campaigns. We only had the bandwidth for those areas. It doesn't mean down the road we won't have more, but right now we're having, just because of the number of people that are involved with it on a day-to-day basis, we have to limit it to it. But as our membership grows and as we get more and more people involved with FAFA, the more that we'll be able to do.
Excellent. Well, I mean, I'm really glad that the organization exists, because I personally, I feel really bad for the suffering that these animals go through, and it's so unnecessary. And again, even if you're going to use them for food and fiber, there are proper ways to respect their life. Yeah. So I really appreciate everybody that's in your organization. I think it's a great movement. And I hope that people listening get excited about it and check the website out, and at least sign up for information, for newsletter, become a member.
To our webinar.
Yes, and come to the webinar and check future CE opportunities.
Right.
So yeah, is there anything that we forgot to discuss or mention?
I think you did a great job, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this and get it out to your audience. And we are gonna be doing more and more as time goes on. But I'm really pleased with how things have turned out so far, and how much we've been able to do in 8 months' time. And considering the limitation of resources, which is always an issue for any nonprofit organization. But we're there's more and more people that are becoming interested in what we're doing. Excellent. So thank you again for broadcasting that.
No, thank you for being here. This has been really good information. We have not done a lot of stuff on large animals, so I really appreciate you taking the time to share this with our audience. And I learned some, and hopefully everybody else learned some. So I really appreciate you being here. And for everybody that's listening, thank you for listening, and thank you for caring.
Thank you.